Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Podcast, episode number 100. A tribute to Lane Benoit, part 1. Part 2 tomorrow, part 3 the next day. Big Buck Registry is a virtual museum of hunting stories. We preserve a piece of Americana by interviewing and recording hunters about their hunts and experiences from across the country. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that'll help us take our hunt to the next level. Welcome to another episode of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast. This is Jay Scott. When I started this podcast a couple years ago, I had no idea where it would go. But it's led me to some unbelievable spots with some unbelievable people that I can't say thank you enough to. In particular, I'd like to thank Dusty Phillips for joining me on a very early episode when he shot his Chubby Tines buck. He is an instrumental and very important part of this show. I bounce ideas off of him every day, and without him, this show would not be where it is today. This is episode 100, and episode 100 deserves something special, and I couldn't think of anything better than to pay tribute to my friend, my deer hunting friend, Lane Benoit, who passed away just recently. There is an empty spot in my life, as I'm sure there are for many outdoorsmen, and anytime a great hunter passes, it certainly hits home. So what I thought I should do is to go find many of Lane's friends and get some insight as to how they knew Lane in part 1 of episode 100, a tribute to Lane Benoit. First, we speak with Hal Blood on hunting together again.
I went over to visit Larry. Me and Chris was my partner, Chris Dalty, my Big Woods business. We were going to Vermont fishing over on Champlain to do a TV show. And on the way over, I got thinking, I like to stop to see Larry again. So I called Larry, and he goes, yeah. He says, you stop right in. So I can't remember if it was on the way over or back, but it doesn't matter. And we had a nice visit with Larry. I don't know. When you used to visit him, he'd want to spend all day with you. But we'd been there a few hours, and it was getting later on, and we was saying goodbye to him, getting ready to leave, and Lane showed up, and so then he wanted to talk, so we ended up staying another hour anyways. But Lane came in, and he had Larry's supper all warmed up on a plate with tinfoil over it, and brought him his supper and said he'd been doing that every day, pretty much since his mother had passed on, and he would come check on his father every day and spend some time with him every evening after he got out of work. So that just kind of struck me as, just the way he was, caring about his father and stuff like that. So now I would say they're up there in the sky hunting together again.
I agree. I'd say hunting's pretty good for the Lord right now.
Yeah. I don't know if it's all in a plan, you know what I mean? It's kind of, you miss people like that and stuff like that, but we don't have any control over it.
Right. Yeah, it's, as Lane used to say, it is what it is.
Yeah, I bet, talk to Lane all the time. We'd always run into each other. We'd be at the same sportsman shows sometimes, and he was always a guy that would go out of his way to say hi to everybody and, talk to everybody, and, he always said to us, because, a lot of times people would think that me and my guys in my Big Woods business would be like competitors because we did seminars too and sold DVDs, and Lane was the one that pointed out we never looked at it that way. I never did, and he never did. We were all on the same team. We're all kind of shooting for the same goals to teach people how to hunt and track, and it wasn't a competition. It was just all about helping the people out that wanted to learn from us.
Right. You were both hunting similar styles in the same kind of areas.
Yeah, similar style. The only other thing I'd say mainly is I know those guys, tracked most of the time. All of them did. They didn't do a lot of hunting on the bare ground. they'd come to Maine initially. When they started coming to Maine, they'd pretty much come for the whole season and just kind of hang around and wait for snow. You know what I mean? They'd go search out the snow in the mountains, but they didn't really go around and still hunt a heck of a lot. They started doing that when they went out to Ontario, because a lot of times there was no snow out there. So, and there was a lot more deer in Ontario when they started going. So it was pretty easy to kill a buck out there, still hunting around them burns and clear cuts. But out this way, they mostly just tracked, and that's why I had to, because of guiding, I had to hunt every day of the week, no matter what the conditions were. And so a lot of my information, my books and all that is about hunting in the big woods, whether there's snow or not, bare ground, places to put stands, how to still hunt. I wrote a lot about that stuff. But the tracking end of it, I think we pretty much did a lot of the similar things,
Gotcha. What are you going to miss the most about Lane?
Well, I'd say it's a tight-knit group of guys that do what we do, and especially the ones that teach what we do. So we're down a man now, it's like Blood Brothers or something, now we're down a man on that,
Right.
And his brothers ain't getting any younger either, and quite frankly, I'm not, I'm going to be 58 this spring, so it kind of gets me thinking, got to take care of our bodies. The older you get, the harder it gets a little bit, and you really got to take care of yourself,
Right, gotcha.
So I just miss him being around in the hunting community, and following what he does on Facebook. I know he was just getting a start in his new thing with his boy, and that was kind of disappointing too when that happened, because he just started getting a gig going with his son Zeb, and so that kind of ended it all. But so that's what I miss. I miss having him around to teach people and spread the word about what we do.
Next, we speak with Richard Bernier on the unselfish Lane Benoit.
Well, my time with the entire family goes back to the early '80s, and the striking thing about Lane, and this really is about Lane tonight, is and no disrespect or to any of his brothers or his late dad, but the thing about Lane that struck me as being so much different from any of the other players as they're known, nationwide, was Lane was unpretentious. He wasn't looking for anybody to know who he was. He just lived life.
Right.
And it appeared that Lane lived it in a way that made him feel good. He enjoyed it. And I think a lot of the stigma with Lane initially on was, of course, that big burly beard and hair everywhere, and I'm quite envious of the fact that he had all that hair, and his booming voice. But once you get past all of that, inside was a warm-hearted guy that I think would probably do anything for anybody.
Yeah, I would agree with
that. Sometimes, the stigma is that people can't get past the outer surface, and often indeed are the times when you do, you really find out what somebody's really like.
Right. Richard, did you spend any time in the woods with Lane?
I didn't, and here's how it used to go. It was kind of early on. It wasn't a rivalry, but it was a stipulated thing. When we hunted up in northern Maine, I don't mind talking about this now because the deer are all but gone up there, and really another whole story, and it's sad. But the big bog located north of the Golden Road, and back in the early 80s, there was only one road in there. And Benoits would set up camp on the eastern side of the bog with their school buses, and the Berniers would set up camp on the western side of the big bog in a camper, and never the two shall wander into the other's side of the bog.
Gotcha.
And on Sundays we'd go and visit and shoot in the pit and shoot the breeze, and that was always a fun time, and see how each other was doing, what they were seeing for sign, what they were, if anybody had shot anything, and So in terms of being in the same general areas, yes. Hunted some of the same general areas out in Western Ontario with Lane. In fact, often I'd see Lane downtown on a pay phone or something of that nature and stop and say, "Hey, you lost?" And he'd chuckle and laugh. And so, but never hunted, And here's the thing about Lane, again, that sets him apart, I think, and probably has more of my respect, is that Lane basically enjoyed the solitude of the woods. He wasn't a gang hunter. I know he shared a lot of hunts with his best friend Dave Coker. I'm sure you're aware of Dave.
Absolutely, yeah.
And but Lane was, in fact, Dave Coker was with Lane when he shot I believe it's the heaviest buck ever killed by any of the Benoits. The one he shot in Maine that dressed 284, and that was 2 days after he shot it. And I saw that buck hanging, and it was immense. And even at that, Lane was like, yeah, it's a nice deer, and it just it wasn't like, I mean, a lot of the guys that I know, a lot of guys that they're in positions of, if you will, prestige, or perceived they are. I mean, they would have gone nuts with a deal like that. They would have taken that to the bank, and Lane just thought it was okay. It's a great deer. And moved, and I think he probably felt the same way about the next deer that might have weighed 200.
Right.
And that's how he was. And what you see is what you got with him. And Lane was always the first person, wherever I was speaking at a show, Lane was always the first person to walk over, shake hands, and say, "Hey, how'd your season go?" So, it's amazing how you can be in the same family, but yet be so different.
Right.
Probably deer for deer, Lanny may well be the best of all of them. And again, all that I'm saying here is personal opinion. And so I have no records to substantiate any of this or whatnot. But you know what? In terms of getting it done in a variety of conditions, particularly on bare ground, there was no one better than Lane. And my dad, when I was growing up, and told me, he says, "Listen, if you can't still hunt on bare ground, you're never going to be able to track deer." And I think both go hand in hand. And when you can do both equally well, you don't get any better than that, Jay. Yeah, that's a well-rounded,
right.
And so, yeah, I really think that probably Lane, again, my opinion, out of the entire family, was what may well have been the most rounded out deer hunter amongst them. That doesn't matter what the condition. Lane's going out there, and you know what? I wouldn't bet against him.
I agree. I mean, I pale in comparison to the Benoits as far as their skill set, and I do okay, but no, I just I don't know if I'll ever get to the level that the Benoits were at or where Lane was at, and I was just getting to know him more and over the last 12 months than I'd ever known him, where he was starting to teach me some things, and he's going to be severely missed overall. And would you say that the where you were hunting in Maine, it was almost like the Hatfield-McCoy line, whereas the Bernier Benoit line?
No, at that time it was sort of there was no rivalry, and both sides were interested in what you did. And I will say, Jay, as I proliferated, if you will, as a writer, and came out with the first book and the second book, and started speaking, and there was some tension that rose, and I'm not certain there was tension initially by the Benoit family as much as perhaps outsiders instigating things or whatnot, and so there was some tension. I mean, where there wasn't before. I mean, Larry stayed in my house several times. I stayed in his, and so it was a little disappointing at that point in my career that that would happen, and then some things happened within the family itself that literally I didn't want to be any part of. I did not want to get in the middle of any of that, and so I literally I literally backed away, and said, okay, Dick Bernier, how do you reinvent yourself as to be, not take away from anything you're doing or the style of hunting, but yet be different?
Right.
And that's what I tried to, that's what I have attempted to do. And while at the same time looking at a distance from guys that I admired way back when. And so, when something like this happens, especially unexpectedly, it hit home. It hits home. I mean, way too young. I mean, way too soon. And I could see his eyes would dance, much like his dad's.
Right.
When somebody had a question or somebody wanted to see if he would jump in. He was energetic to teach people how to do what he, I'm sure, had taken for granted.
Gotcha.
And that's a rare person that wants to do that.
Yep. Have you added any kind of repertoire to your hunting skill set that you learned from Lane?
Still, I mean, I used to be, boy, I can't wait till it snows. I can't wait till it snows so I can, and boy, I said, well, wait a minute. Listen, man, I was trained on bare ground to still hunt. And, if I've got to wait till snow falls, I said, some seasons I might not hunt. And I said, so I need to go back to school, so to speak, and put that woodsmanship skills to work. And there's no reason why I can't kill a nice buck on bare ground any more than I can on snow. And literally, when I put my mind back to that and started paying attention to what I should have been doing, things all just came back together. And it didn't have to date now, Jay. If it doesn't snow in deer season, I'm not boo-hooing. I don't care. It doesn't matter.
Right.
I feel like I'm just as effective on bare ground as I am on snow. And I mean, there's some seasons where I said, okay, now I really don't. I hope it doesn't snow because I've got this buck figured out, and that'll only mess things up if it does snow.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of the way Lane went about that, yeah, I mean, so borrowing from him on that, absolutely. I tire now of listening to guys that whine, if you will, that I wish it would snow, and you know what, Jay. 85% of them don't know what to do when it does snow. And so basically I just, go wherever I speak, one of the points I make is this. Conditions change day to day, sometimes hour by hour. We hunt the most adaptable big game on the planet, at least in North America.
Right.
What we fail to do as hunters with a far superior brain is we fail to adapt to the conditions that we have in front of us. And because we don't succeed.
Very true.
And I think I think Lane was great at adapting to the conditions he had in front of him.
I agree with that. What are you going to miss the most about Lane Benoit?
With that new tracking series that he had started, and boy, at the age he was doing it, I'm thinking, wow, Lane, that's ambitious. And again, looking at it from not even having a conversation with him regarding that is, and watching him as. And there's a couple other points I want to make, Jay, and if you'd give me time to do it.
Absolutely.
I think they're important, but I'm going to get to answer that question is, I think there's a whole lot more insight that Lane had that is never going to come forward. It's never going to be heard. It's never going to be seen. And I think that's a bit of a tragedy. And the fact that, there's not a lot of tried and true deer trackers left. It's if you will, people would say it's a dying art. It's a long, and I'm hoping that's not the case. I'm hoping everything is circular and it's going to come back around and people are going to realize that, oh no, this is the way to hunt. But when you lose somebody that prolific and do so suddenly, it sends shockwaves through the whole community. And hopefully, I guess that the people will sit back and realize, listen, Moy, don't take anything for granted. Don't take anything for granted. Literally live life to the fullest. And that, which segues me into a thing I did want to say, Jane.
Sure.
At least it's important to me.
Yes.
Is this speaks volumes about the man that he was as well. is the fact that I know that Lane sacrificed hunting time, his own pursuit, over the course of at least the last 2 seasons prior to this year, ensuring that his dad was out hunting and did whatever he could to put him in a position to succeed.
That's a very, very good point. You're absolutely right.
And you know what? That's unselfish. And that's why I can fairly say that Lane was unpretentious.
Right.
And he cared more about ensuring that his dad, had the opportunity while he could. And that wasn't just deer hunting, that was turkey hunting. That was anything that he could ensure that. So, and Lane went without deer in order to ensure that happened. And again, that just speaks volumes of who Lane Benoit was.
Yeah, he touched many people in that way, and was always willing to give you a hand, whether it was a tip or, and that's how he put himself out there. Is just he wanted to share his knowledge to make you a better hunter, and that's just amazing.
And that it didn't matter who you were. It did not matter who you were to Lane Benoit.
Right. If you wanted the knowledge, if you wanted the information, he'd give it to you. He didn't judge.
Absolutely.
I'm going to ask the question. If there's something that maybe you've seen that nobody else seen that really never got above ground for everybody to witness or experience, is there anything that you can mention that maybe was something that wasn't shared?
Well, I can tell you that again, I so many today, are into hero worship and I look at things from a different perspective. I've been really successful at a number of things, including deer hunting, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that I've been able to do what I've done. But the most important things in life, at least in my opinion, aren't necessarily the things that show the most. And I watched Lane, build a home for his family, and the way that Lane raised his son with Irene, and in a way that that and didn't make a big deal out of it, but yet nurtured and raised that young boy into the man he is today, and never missed a beat. Was part of the wrestling program for his son. Drove the bus, did a whole host of things that nobody would know. And he did it because, you know what? It needed to be done. I'm going to do it. And wasn't looking for a pat on the back or congratulate. Lane would raffle off a hunt with himself in order to raise money for the school wrestling team.
Right.
That's Lane Benoit.
That is Lane Benoit.
Not many people know that.
Right. That's something that, I'm glad you shared, because it's an awesome thing that Lane did, and that needs to be carried forward.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. Sometimes folks put their priorities in the wrong places. And to me, deer hunting is a recreational sport, and I love to do it. I've spent most of my adult life studying, photographing, hunting, writing, talking about the animal. But, when it comes down to times like this where somebody's literally left us, again, far too soon, yes, they'll be remembered for being the kind of deer hunter they were, but that doesn't define the man. What defines the man is some of the things that I've shared with you that maybe you guys weren't expecting to hear. Maybe you were hoping you're going to hear some legendary stories of tracking deers through the, swamps and mountains, and which he did. But, to remember a man for the things that he did that were really important, I think significantly talk about who he was. And they'll be long remembered by his family after they've forgotten about some of the deer he shot. Yeah,
agreed. You made me and Jay both see another side of Lane that wasn't out there. It wasn't in the public eye.
No, and you know what? And that's Lane.
Right.
Again, he didn't do anything to be showy. That wasn't him. It was not him.
I think that's what separated him from the rest.
Oh yeah.
Completely.
I'll tell you, here's another part. And it wasn't that because he'd so amassed so many deer. Because I know when I mess up on a deer that I've tracked and I've worked for, I'm really not happy at the moment. And it happens. And it happens to everyone, whether they want to admit it or not. But they had a PBS special that they linked with the Field and Stream linked with the tribute to Lane, and and Lane tracked that buck on not too much snow, got that close, and then missed him. And his reaction was, "So Lane, that was him." Yeah, I get all excited. I missed. Okay. Man, but you know what? That was him. We'll go find another one.
That's awesome.
He enjoyed the challenge. And, I've got a piece I'm working on for publication, and I was looking over it today, and it's literally titled Seeking, and part of the seeking is the actual hunt itself. And I believe Lane embodied the actual hunt itself. He enjoyed the hunt itself, not necessarily the rewards at the end of the hunt.
Right, which is different. It's not always the reward. It's just the experience that you get. He
enjoyed the hunt to its fullest.
Yes, he did. Yep.
And again, that sets him apart to a great degree. It wasn't a means to an end. It was this is the journey, and I'm enjoying every aspect of that journey.
Right.
I know of guys, friends of mine, that have seen Lane back and beyond in the Hampshire mountains or in the Vermont places, and a lot of guys, if they were back in there looking and scouting or whatnot, and Lane did the scouting, and they would be terribly upset to think somebody was back in there. Nope, not Lane. He backs his Jeep up, he pulls over, he gets out, and he has a 2-hour conversation with them and starts sharing information about deer he knows on that mountain. That's Lane Benoit.
Next up, Steve Beckwith asks, what would the slammer do?
Lane got in touch with me and another friend of mine back 5-6 years ago, and he wanted to come to Maine. He was just getting into turkey hunting, and he wanted to come to Maine and see if he could shoot a bird up this way. So me and another friend got together and with Lane and took him out, and he shot his first bird with the two of us, and the other friend's name was Nathan Fenderson, and we had a wonderful time, and it created a long-lasting friendship by getting involved with him in turkey hunting that turned into, taking care of his personal website and joining me at many shows. Last year he attended the Rockingham sporting show and didn't have a booth, so he came down to the MaineHunters.com booth and stayed with us for the day on Saturday, and all of his fans came, to talk to him, and we got to meet a lot of them and meet a lot of his acquaintances and go out on many dinner occasions with him. And Lane and I, share tons and tons of phone messages back and forth. So
sure.
Over the 5 years that he and I were friends, and miss him greatly at this point. So
yeah,
as does many sportsmen.
He's affected the lives of many, many sportsmen. There's no question. I mean, right down to the grain of your being. Certainly did that for me. There's just kind of the way I live my life. Some of it definitely came from Lane, like just how he viewed the world. No question.
Exactly.
About it. Yeah.
He shared those views so openly between like yourself and myself and other hunters out there. And you do adapt some of his methods and ways of thinking. And he was a very logical sportsman that could relate to any. He was a big buck tracker, but he could relate to what my team does, which is, we're the weekend warriors. We go out hunting, and guys on that are Maine hunters that we call them. They're happy with shooting a spike horn if they're excited about it and they're thrilled about that type of a hunt. Our team is behind people that like to do that kind of hunting. Lane was a major buck tracker, and that was his forte. But he had a full respect for the whole gambit of all of hunters. That's why he was so well liked, and his family is so well liked. They are just great people.
I can't tell you how many times I was in the woods and I'd be on a track and I'd get to a crossroads, so to speak, and I'd say, what would Lane do right now?
Yeah.
I just do that a lot.
Myself included. Yeah, myself included. In fact, he started doing some tips in the woods this year and gave me a phone call after he had done some using his cell phone and said, hey, Steve, you should start doing that. And there was a tip right there. Lane turned me on to bringing my iPhone in the woods with me and putting out some pro tips while I'm sitting in the woods in between hunts. And he just was a great guy like that.
Yeah, he really was. He was always willing to share an idea or a tip that he learned or just stuff he's known for years. And he's probably forgotten more about big buck tracking than I'll ever know.
Yeah, that is so true. And that's what the shocker is to all of us in the sporting world that knew Lane and were friends with him. And even if you didn't know him, you felt like you were friends with him.
Right.
And, we're going to all miss that we can't. I personally have picked up my cell phone several times in the last few weeks and started to text him or dial his phone number and caught myself in the middle of it. And, just a hard situation. The tears start running and you think about your old friend, So.
Absolutely, and that'll happen for a very, very long time, probably until the day I die, too.
Yep.
Yeah. What was your favorite funny idiosyncrasy that Lane had?
Well, I don't really think there was anything that I considered about Lane that I could chuckle about. I guess it would have to be his nickname, Slammer. And it's very fitting, he shot Slammer bucks, and that was his calling card, so to speak. Yeah, and we all know what he meant when he said his name was Slammer. His email is Slammer. Everything he had about him was Slammer. So he, I guess I would have to say, that would be something that he developed and nicknamed himself, and not many people I know call himself Slammer.
Yeah, that was something pretty special. That he kind of coined that term and made it something. Slammer was never really any special word until Lane started using it. And anybody in the outdoor world, if you said Slammer, you knew that it was
who he
was. Where's the Slammer today? Yeah, that's Lane Benoit. That's for sure.
And that's one thing that I've taken from it, and really enjoyed about him. So he knew how to promote himself, and but he wasn't an edgy type of person at all. He just let things naturally flow, and let things be. And he was working hard at getting his own show rolling, and it was coming right along. And he'd been talking to me about it quite frequently. In fact, he was about to join my New England Outback network and get his show onto my network, and it just may or may not happen now. We'll see how things work out for Zeb and his cameraman Paul. I understand they're going to continue on, so and keep doing what Lane was doing and promoting it and promoting the Benoits. And I think that all I can say is Zeb had an awesome teacher.
Yeah,
I think he'll do well.
Can you imagine having the professor that Zeb had growing up? That would be. I mean, I just being around Lane when I was, and Steve, by the way, he mentioned great things about you when I was around him, and he had a great amount of respect for what you're doing. And but boy, if I could sit with Lane for just a whole season every day, it would have been tremendous. So I really treasure the time that I did get to spend with him, which wasn't a ton of time, but it was certainly enough to make me feel like I was part of his world, and he definitely was part of mine before he even knew who I was.
Exactly, and that's the type of guy Lane really was. If the people that got to know him in his lifetime understand that, and the people that didn't, like I said before, I really think they understand it too, because he spoke at so many seminars along the way and different shows, and that if anyone has sat into his seminars and watched him talk, he's got such a passion for what he's talking about, and he knows how to relate to a sportsman to the point where they walk out of that room feeling like they've known Lane all their lives. And that's why there's such a draw for people that have actually never sat down to dinner with him or gone on a turkey hunt like I have. I wish I had done a lot more. There wasn't enough time in the 5 years of knowing Lane was a very busy man, and I feel very fortunate to have had the time that I've gotten from him in the 5 years that I've known him. And we had so many plans, but that's life, and we everybody has to go on, and hopefully I can continue to keep Zeb in my life, and Irene, and keep tabs with the Benoit family. Lane was my connection, and I would hate to lose that. They're great people. So.
We next speak with Tom Blais on the complexities of a mountain man.
Lane was a complicated man, you know. I mean, I never got really close to him like I did with Lanny and Shane, and I think in a lot of ways, Lane was a lot like Larry. You know, he was a hard man to get along with sometimes, and really to understand. You know what I mean? They were a lot alike in a lot of ways, I guess. But yeah, we had some good times though. You know, Lane was a heck of a deer hunter. You know, he was a big woods buck hunter. Like the rest of the Benoits, but he kind of, you know, hunted on his own. You know, he really didn't, hunt with a crowd like I guess Lanny and Shane and Larry kind of hunted together, and Lane always kind of, you know, did his own thing. He was kind of a lone wolf, you know.
Sure, yeah. Now you've videotaped Lane on a few of the hunts, as I recall. And
oh yeah.
Some of my more favorite hunts that I've seen on some of the earlier DVDs are with you videotaping Lane. And tell me a little bit about what it was like following Lane around when you were on him with a camera.
Well, Lane, he was good. You know, he when I got a chance to film him, he was a real hardworking guy. You know, he really wanted to, to tell a lot and to get a lot of good footage, you know, whatever it took, you know, to get the good footage. He was willing to do that. He actually ran camera too. I mean, he filmed, different camera guys and stuff like that, and tried to do some self-filming, which is really hard to do, you know. So he was pretty easy to work with, I thought, you know, as far as enthusiastic about getting footage and stuff. Some of the other Benoits, you know, especially in the beginning, they're like, I just want to hunt. He couldn't stop and say, well, let's film the track or talk about the sign that we're seeing. You know, you're always, especially tracking, just trying to catch up to the buck and shoot the deer. But Lane, yeah, he was definitely a hard-working guy, you know, and I don't know. So I guess one of the craziest things that happened, basically, Craig Jakes, was the cameraman at the time, was filming Lane, and I was filming Lanny about a mile away. And it was probably 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and we heard 3 fast shots, you know, long distance away. And I was with Lanny Benoit, and Lanny goes, that's Lane. I go, you sure? He goes, yeah. And I'm thinking, well, maybe we should go down there and see if they got something, you know. And so he goes, all right, we'll go down there, because Craig was kind of a new camera guy. And I said, well, you didn't have that good a camera with microphones and stuff, so maybe we'll have to go down there and do some reenactments, or, you know, get to recover it or something if he shot a deer. So we trucked down there. We knew where they were hunting, and we hiked back down in there. And here's Lane and Craig with a great big buck. I mean, this was at the time probably Lane's best rack buck. I think it was in Canada. It was probably scored in the 160s. You know, tremendous, you know, big 5x5 buck, big body buck too. And so I said, well, I'll just work with these guys for a while. And Laney said, well, okay, I'll pick you up in an hour. I said, all right. So he hiked back out of the woods, and so I was there with Lane and Craig, and I said, well, you know, tell me what happened. And so I mic'd him up, and I said, just take me through the whole hunt, and I'll film you. And Craig, you can run your camera, you know, behind me and learn and try to film. And I told Lane to load his gun, and maybe I'd have him. They didn't really get to kill that good, so I said, you know, just load your gun, and maybe I'll just have you do some shooting and kind of get like a different camera angle or something like that. In post-production, we can make it look a little better if you didn't get it that good. It's like, all right. So basically, we filmed the interview of the deer and stuff like that, and then, you know, spent like maybe 15 minutes, and then we did a big circle, and he's showing us, you know, showing me and the camera, you know, how they found the spot, showing the sign, and walking around, and he's walking up to a spot where he's going to sit for the morning, and all of a sudden this buck comes right up over this hill, another 10-pointer, and Lane's like, Craig, take my gun. And I'm just filming it, you know, right over the shoulder. And Lane hands his rifle to Craig. Craig lays his camera on the ground. And this is, you know, we're doing a reenactment, but this is reality, you know. And all of a sudden Craig takes it, pow, pow. He shoots that buck, and it runs off. That deer dies. So now I got another reenactment. And I go, tell me, you know, what happened? This is crazy. And you see in the video, it's really real, you know.
Yeah.
You know, that whole scene was crazy. And then I remember hiking back out of the woods, and I met up with Shane Lanny, and they said, "How'd things go?" And I said, "Pretty good." I filmed, I helped Lane's hunt. I filmed a little bit of this and that, the missing pieces. And I go, and Craig shot a deer too. And I got that on film. And they're like, "Really?" Like, yeah.
That's a great story.
Yeah,
a great
it was
story.
Good footage, and I mean, things like that don't happen too often, and to get it on film is really cool,
Absolutely.
That's intense.
But I got a bunch of stories. Lane, I knew those guys really well. I spent a lot of time. I used to spend 2 to 3 weeks a year filming the Benoits, and then I'd go do my hunts, usually late season somewhere. And, I guess they were kind of like a rock band. They kept together for 10 years. Most rock bands don't last that long. You got brothers working together, and they did it as a part-time business. It wasn't a full-time money-making thing for them doing books and videos. It was a wintertime project. They all had regular jobs. I mean, Lane was a sheetrocker, and he never quit that.
Right.
So, it was tough for those guys to get along in the business side of it. So it deteriorated, probably about 5 years ago. Larry was getting older and he was getting sick of doing it, and they weren't getting along. And then kind of Lane spent time hunting with his dad before he passed away, and they became a team and stuff. I thought that was kind of nice. And then Lanny and Shane they hunted together. But a lot went on. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things happen in deer camp I probably should talk about. But another hunt. I remember I was with Lane, and it was towards the end of the season. He was having a rough season. It's bad luck. He kind of nicked a big buck and didn't get that, and it got away. It was just a flesh wound or whatever. But anyway, he was getting really discouraged, and the other guys kind of had tagged out. I said, I got to go with Lane, and try to get something in the next couple of days. And so he was hunting a couple of areas. One area was a big bog, and it was you could get like 300-yard shots. It was like a grassy open area. And I said, with his gun, and I said, well, I've got a 300 Win Mag. It's a really nice gun, and it shoots at, I can shoot 600 yards with it. It's got a real hair trigger. It's set up for shooting long range. And so if you want, I can lug that out there. And he's like, yeah, that'll be all right, And so we had this buck come out one evening. It was way the hell out there. And he looked at me and he said, oh, maybe I should grab that 300. I was like, all right. So he had a shooting stick, and I said, there's a real hair trigger on that thing. I'm just warning you, it's less than 2 pounds. And so he lines up on that deer, and he just touches that trigger, and wham! And his hat flew around sideways, because he really didn't hold the gun real tight. Yeah. And he got the deer, and he said, I guess that thing's got a hair trigger. And no, he liked that gun, but he said, man, that's a hell of a gun. But no, we got that deer, and I'm trying to think. What we had in common is, Wayne has a son, Zeb, which is, I think he's 23. He seems like, we talk about our sons, Wayne would talk about Zeb, and, it's youth weekend and somebody's taking him out. And I said, well, it's youth weekend and my son's going out for the first time. So I think they're about the same age. My son's 23, and I think Zeb is too. And if Zeb's listening to this, I'm really sorry, because, I lost my dad when I was 25. My dad was 50, I was 25, so I know what he's going through. Mm-hmm. Unexpectedly, the same type of deal. But we talked about our sons a lot. He'd brag up his son about wrestling, and, he spent a lot of time with his son fishing and hunting and stuff, and I did the same thing. So that was the biggest thing that Lane and I had in common, and we talked about it all the time. Our sons were the same age. So I'll miss that, too. And, I remember when I did the segment, I forget what video it was. It might have been the third one. Basically did a segment on each one of the Benoits and Larry, too, what they did for work and stuff like that, kind of like a profile. And I remember going with Lane, and, I spent in the summertime, I went up there just for a day. He was fishing with his son and playing horseshoes. He used to play horseshoes a lot, had a big horseshoe pit, and he did it competitively around the area too, pitching horseshoes and stuff. I think Shane probably got him into that a long time ago.
Yeah. And
then snowmobiling, he lived, I don't know if you know where he lived, but, his woman Eileen and Zeb, they lived Stevens Brook Road, so they lived in a nice log cabin, dead-end road, no power. So he had solar and then a generator, and he used to have to spark up that generator. I remember going to his house filming him. He's like, I got to put wood in the stove, and then he had to fire up the generator.
Yeah.
He's a mountain man, he looked like a mountain man, he's kind of intimidating looking guy, he's the type of guy that kind of have to watch what you say to them too. Sometimes, kind of like Larry too. They're quick to fight, quick to get mad. You know what I mean? And Larry was like that too. You know, so he was kind of a brawler back in his younger days too. And I'd seen him in action. You know, and especially if he was drinking a few beers. But other than that, he was a good guy. He, like I said, hard work. And I remember going to one of his jobs. I said, "Well, call me up. I got to get some shots of you sheetrock." And he goes, "Oh, I got a job next week." So I went up. It was probably in the wintertime. And he had his other brother working for him at the time. He goes, he didn't want to be filmed or whatever, but he used to hunt with him back in the day. But anyway, Lane's up there on stilts, mudding the ceilings and stuff. I mean, that's hard work. That's a rough life. He's just a blue collar, hard working guy. And a big buck hunter as well.
Right. Yeah, and I think a lot of us are that way. We're blue-collar guys at heart, and we just love deer hunting. It's just I think that's kind of the nature of a lot of us that are out there. Tom, what did you learn from Lane that you've added to your own hunting repertoire?
I think the biggest thing about Lane, out of all the Benoits, I must say, he wasn't really into, gimmicks and stuff like that. They're all old school hunters and stuff like that. Like Lane would be more of a scout, and Shane's got a lot of different techniques as well. But Lane hunted probably harder than anybody out of the group. Like, he got up earlier, he stayed in the woods longer. Guys like Lanny, even Shane, like Lanny he's not that serious about hunting. He scouts for the first week or two, and then he'll kill deer because he just like driving around and having people with him. Yeah. Different type of guy, you know what I mean? Lane liked to be by himself, but and hunt hard right from the day one he got to camp, whether he's in Maine or Hampshire or wherever, because he'd be serious almost, really, really serious about hunting, and then work. I guess what I learned is like work ethic on hunting. I personally don't hunt like that, but I hunt hard. But every hour that you can spend in the woods, you're just increasing your odds. Versus a lot of guys got a week or 2 weeks, and then they waste a lot of time. A rainy day, just stay home, play cards. Well, Lane, that's not Lane Benoit. He'd be out there, hour before light and an hour after light, because that could be the day for him, and I think that's why he was really successful for shooting big deer. And I think too, he got, I think shooting that deer with Craig, that 160 class deer, and that was probably in 2001 or two, somewhere around the early 2000s. And then it changed him in a way of thinking about, I like shooting deer with big racks instead of like shooting deer that weigh 250 or whatever. So you still like the big deer, mature deer, but he really got more into the big antler thing. And that's kind of what I was into too. And so him and I used to talk about that. He got into scoring the rack to kind of understand, what's a 140 class deer versus a 160. And the other Benoits could give it about, score, even to this day, they like big racks and stuff. But Lane was the only one that kind of got modernized a little bit in that way, and also doing more, thinking about, hey, maybe I should travel to the Midwest or go to some of these other places before I get too old and stuff, and not just the big woods, maybe go venture, off, do something a little different. And I think I've learned that from him too. And I said, well, I kind of think like that too, I don't like hunting the same piece of woods for 20 years, maybe we should go, 1,000 miles south or, go do something different, something unique.
Gotcha. Tom, what are you going to miss the most about Lane Benoit?
Well, what I'm going to miss the most? A little bit of a couple of things. One is, he's always, most of the time he's always smiling,
Yep.
And friendly with people, when we used to do up to 12 shows a year, and some were, like a 3-day event, like the Yankee Sportsman Show and Springfield Show, but a lot of times they were just a 1-day show that somebody was putting on and did charity events. They'd sell tickets, and we'd go down there and we'd sell them our products at, discount prices and stuff like that. So we'd go down there for a half a day, and, we had some, and a lot of times we went to dinner afterwards and stuff like that. So we had a really good time. And talking to him, I really miss talking about big bucks with big racks, talking score or talking, somebody shot an X amount, deer and scored so much in northern Maine. Somebody shot one in Minnesota. It was so big. And talking about the big woods and talking about possibilities, how things change. You know, like Ontario was good for a number of years, then it got played out, and what's new, what's hot, you know, and in the big buck world and the big woods too, you know, because we both love, you know, I still love the big woods. I do most of my hunting in the big woods. When you got somebody like Lane, that's all they think about, you know. I mean, and he was a blue collar guy. I was a blue collar guy, and I still am. I was a stonemason for 20 years, and I owned a quarry. I ran a quarry for 10 years. I just sold that. So I basically used to bust my ass for 7 months out of the year, and then I take 2 months to go film and hunt and basically then do shows in the wintertime. So
right.
He had the same mindset, you know, I'm going to work, I'll just sheep rock and then save my money. And that's the way all the Benoits are. And just, you know, and maybe we're not building a retirement fund, but, you know, look at Lane. He didn't need a retirement fund, which sucks, but he hunted every year. He didn't miss a November. You know, he hunted almost every November, the whole month. And that he really lived that way. He lived good, you know, and he had a lot of good memories in the woods. You're not going to remember a hard day at work, but you're going to remember a day in the woods, you know. So I guess that's what I'm going to miss most about his, you know, his stories too. He used to tell a lot of animated stories about a lot of bucks. He spent so much time in the woods that, you know, he had a lot of encounters. A lot of bucks got away, and a lot of them didn't. So you can learn a little bit from every story from everybody, you know. He'd listen to people's stories too, unlike some famous hunters and stuff, you know, like blah, blah, blah. I remember at the shows, and people would come up to Lane and say, you know, tell him their story, and he would listen to them. It was nice.
Matt Trombley on Getting to Know the Silent Predator.
Huge fan of the Benoits and following them with ever since his dad's first book came out. I got Larry's paperback as a young man in high school. I think it was in 8th grade. My grandfather gave it for Christmas. I've always followed them. And in the last 10 years, run into the boys up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire. I've been hunting up there for, 15, 16 years now. And we stay at the same lodge that Dave Coker and Lane had stayed at, and I still talk to Dave, actually, chatted with him this morning on Facebook. But had gotten to know Lane, just like you, on a personal basis in the last 2 years. He approached me at a sportsman show down in New Hampshire last year and talking about this wool clothing line that I got into a franchise with called Silent Predator about 5 years ago. We got into this. Myself and Ian Dewey, a fellow firefighter from Lebanon, New Hampshire.
Yep.
You know, like I said, we were down in Harrisburg. I literally just got home last night. Ian's still down there finishing out the show this week.
Yep.
And I've also gotten to know Paul Dupuis, who is, as you know, Lane's cameraman.
Absolutely.
And
Paul was the guy that called me and texted me with the news.
Yes. Yep. Well, the same thing. He asked me, he said, can you talk? And we had just gotten to the show booth on Monday morning, and I said, yeah. And I called him, and he says, Irene found Lane dead in bed. And I'm like, I was just dumbfounded. I'm like, are you serious? Hard to even process at first. So I blurted it right out in the show in front of everybody. It just was hard to take in for a few minutes. I was speechless.
It's one of those things that it just, you don't want to believe it. You don't believe it initially.
No.
And you just try to tune it out like, no, I was reading that wrong. Yeah, you know, and I've lost a lot of people over the last year, and it just it doesn't seem to end right now, and I don't really understand why. And I don't know if we'll ever understand it completely. Their powers are great, large, much bigger than us, that have ways about them we'll never truly understand, I don't think. But it's
I couldn't agree more. I've dealt with the same thing, and it's odd how a lot of times you talk with people that are having the same challenges in life, whether it's a death in the family, marital issues, et cetera, et cetera. In the last 2 years, I've lost two very close friends that were hunters, mentors to me. My dad's best friend literally died 12 hours after they returned from Pittsburgh, New Hampshire 2 years ago, day before Thanksgiving. And then the next spring, we lost my mom's brother, both young in life in their 60s. And, you know, like you said, this is another one. I literally shook hands with Lane Thursday night, a week ago, picking up a case of DVDs to take down to the show with us, and I talked to him on the phone Friday driving down there.
Yep.
Said we had a lot of interesting ideas. Him and I were throwing around both with American Tracker and the wool clothing line and how to promote it. And his go-getter attitude is 100% the type of person I am, the way I am with my charter business. And pushing that forward, looking at a second career path after my fire service career.
Right. Yeah.
I've been in the career fire service for 18 years now, and started way back in high school as a volunteer, and just been a huge passion of mine. I'll always be a fireman, but the outdoors is what my whole family eats, sleeps, and breathes. I've kind of taken to the next level, making business out of it. But been a licensed charter captain for 5 years now, and my business continues to grow. And had Lane out in Lake Ontario with Paul and Zeb last year for 2 days, and really got a chance just to meet who the inner guy was, And,
yeah.
Just a phenomenal weekend. And my son, who's my first mate at 13 years old, was there to witness it to. I'm so glad now that where we stand.
Yeah, and Paul and Lane had both told me about the trip they were taking out to Lake Ontario. So you're the guy that they were referring to. So you were going salmon fishing, right?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Yeah. I saw a lot of photos. I mean, Lane was in his element, and he's just such an authentic person. There was nothing fake about the guy. He was just
none whatsoever.
When I first met him, I went to Paul's house. I'd met him years before, and we tied on quite a few, tied on a good one, and had quite a few beers at a lecture. And he doesn't remember that, and quite frankly, I don't either all that well. But he, when I went to actually sit down and have dinner with him, and then we were talking about this North American Tracker project, and Paul and Lane wanted to sit down and get to know me a little bit better. Who's this stranger we're bringing in? He seems to have some things going on, and we need his help with some stuff. But the first thing Lane said to me was, "You don't look anything like your picture on Facebook." And to have somebody like Lane say that to you, he's such a simple guy when it comes down to the woods, and he dumbed it down. But inside, he was a crafty guy. He knew his steps, he knew his strategies, and to say that, hey, you don't look like you're on Facebook, he thinks way outside the box when you don't really expect that from somebody the way he looks. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yep.
He's got a beard. He's a woodsman, but he's still connected to everything, and that was the best part about Lane.
Yeah, no doubt. Him and I had some lengthy conversations, literally in the last 3 months of this time of year, with the sportsman shows going on, and we've been really working hard at this whole promotional thing. Ian and I have been struggling with the wool clothing line since we bought into it to really see it take off to fruition to what we wanted to see. And to doggone it, we really need to get a pro staffer that people recognize, that believe in our product. And unfortunately, to the demise of Beagle Wear, and know the two owners of that very well, one of them's a fellow Burlington fireman. When the boys lost their deal with them, there was obviously the lack of interest in Shane and Lanny to go after much, I think, as far as making any further production out of it. But Lane was not going to be put down. He was looking, obviously, to take off with American Tracker and pick up a new wool clothing line. And he came to us. He tried the product down in New Hampshire last year.
Yeah.
And, I'm a very outgoing person. I teach fire training a lot for the State Fire Academy, so sitting up in front of people jibber-jabbing is very easy for me, and him and I just hit it off. And I said, I followed you my whole life, and I was just astonished that one of the Benoits wanted to be part of what we have to offer. So it just blossomed from there.
Yeah, he was a businessman too, an opportunist, and the opportunity tracking a big buck, I think, kind of translated into life as a business person too, and he knew how to track down that opportunity as well, and he wasn't shy about it, and he had a method about it.
Exactly. His don't give up attitude is something that my parents kind of pick on me, if you will, about. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and grew up as a dairy farm kid in Florence, Vermont, and by God, I said I'm going to be a career firefighter, and took off to college for it. So that's nothing has ever stood my way of going after what I believe in my dreams are, and
right.
Sometimes to financially a little challenges, but Lane's attitude is the same way. And him and I talked a lot just in the last 6 weeks about where we'd like to see this next step go between American Tracker and the wool clothing line, and how do we promote it, and more trips that we could film together, and different opportunities to help each other push forward. And he was just wound about it, just all these different ideas. And we had put together 3 different pieces of our line with the wool clothing, a vest, a jacket, and a pair of pants that had his specific features on it, and had great rapport on it so far with the 3 shows we've done this year. And literally, it just came out the 1st of January.
Right.
So Ian and I are just stunned that the efforts we put forward to this are now on hold, obviously, to see what goes next.
Yeah, it came as an incredible shock. Just nothing you ever want to hear. Taken way before his prime. I don't feel like,
without a doubt.
He was just getting ramped up again and breaking off into his own brand, and just as a representative as he was of the outdoor industry, I feel like you lost a piece of yourself when you heard the news, because he represents something that is very core in all of us as outdoorsmen, as sportsmen, and he did it better than anybody.
Without a doubt. I can recall probably 5 years ago going in to grab a pizza at a little place called the Buck Rub Pub up in Pittsburgh, New Hampshire.
Yes, sir. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And we're all sitting there, and of course, I think a lot of people look at him and the boys as the Hollywood end of New England and big woods deer hunting.
Sure.
But for us, just kind of that reality that, hey, we're in the country that these guys want to be in, and we love Pittsburgh, we love the big woods, and I'm absolutely beside myself that my 13-year-old son would rather go up there and hunt than go sit in a tree stand in Ohio, because I've did a lot of opportunities that I've networked with. But Lane was the one of the 3 boys that, you go up to him, shake hands, and he just started talking hunting. And as I said, how close him and Dave Coker were growing up. And Dave is always, he'll come over to camp and just sit at the table and chew the fat and show pictures and talk stories. And my son and my dad are just enamored with that, just to hear the stories, And,
yeah.
But that's just the type of guy he was, just friendly to everybody. And he put his wing around me in the last 6 months, and to really believe that we could take off and look at things in a much different light. And I like I said, just was really looking forward to building something that could be wonderful. And just dumbfounded right now.
Yep, his spirit was alive, and it still is today. I mean,
without a doubt.
Even though he may not be physically with us, his spirit is alive and well, very much so. I apologize, I'm tearing up a little bit.
No, I'm right there with you. I sat and watched his video, and we had a TV down in Harrisburg at our booth, and we were playing his video, and Ian and I were almost set back, and we had a quiet time when we didn't have anybody in the booth with us. And just sit and watch the dedication that he did to Larry, to literally see the last buck that Larry ever shot on film with Lane sitting there and say, wow, they're together up there reminiscing about that deer right now.
Yep.
And you're right. Ian and I were choked up about it ourselves to say, we're looking at a piece of history right here. And just hard to kind of process it, I guess.
Yeah, it still hasn't sunk in, but boy, he did so much for the outdoors, so much for the hunting industry, and just in fishing too. I mean, he loved fishing. He just loved being outside, and if I don't know if they'll ever make another one like him.
No, without a doubt. We had a very up and down season out in Lake Ontario last year. Every charter captain would tell you that, due to Mother Nature's pressures with the cold weather throughout the wintertime that affected our salmon fishing. But the first evening they came out with me, we only had a couple of bites and we couldn't get anything landed. And that typical don't give up attitude. Lane's like, tomorrow morning's a new day. We trust you. You tell us what we got to try and do. And we started off with a brown trout program in the morning, which the browns are fish that stay on their normal structure out there in the same waters for the most part, not real migratory. So we were able to put 3 or 4 in the boat, dropped a couple others, got some good footage. And I said, all right, you want to switch it up and try and get a king on film. And then without a doubt, Lane, that's the big buck of the world out there for a king salmon. So I switched up my patterns and we headed for deeper water offshore, and we crossed into probably 325 foot of water, and one of our long lines called copper line takes off, and then wouldn't you know, it ends up being a 25-pound king, and it took us probably better part of 25 to 30 minutes to get in the boat. Got some awesome footage, and Lane was just beside himself. You would have thought he just shot a booner, and he said this is his first king salmon ever, and it meant the world to me to be there with him to show him my end of it. And he says, dude, you got something special here. Not only are you good in front of the camera, but he says you were enthusiastic about teaching people, and he says you showed me a thing or three on how to work these fish, and a connection that it left me speechless.
And finally, we speak with my good friend John Klucky from Klucky Outdoors on picking up where you left off.
I mean, we just had such good times together no matter what. We could be apart for a year, a month, a day, and it would pick right back up where we left off. I met him, I can't even tell you how many years ago, when I was racing snowmobiles, and Laney was racing snowmobiles, and that's how we first met. So it was back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s maybe. That's how I first met him. And then we all became friends as hunters and just, kept in touch. And then I was trying to think about this earlier, what year we finally got together to hunt. Because he always wanted to turkey hunt, but just never got around to it, just always wanted to do it. And I'm like, listen, this year, you got to come down, stay with me, and we'll get you out turkey hunting. Well, needless to say, we got a bird. He got his first bird, or I think maybe second bird, or whatever it was, and from there on in, and then I went up to his place, stayed with him, and we turkey hunted up there. I never got to deer hunt with him, unfortunately, because we just always couldn't connect. He was busy, I was busy, and we were going to do it this year, and, look what happened. You just never know. That's why you have to do things when you can and really make an effort to do the things that you want to do in life, because it's a perfect example. I mean, he was one of my best friends. It just very hard to get over that. You can't stop thinking about it. You're trying to function in life, and it's just a hard thing to swallow. It
is. And, he was such a presence if you're ever around him. Like, how some of those guys just kind of take over the room in a sense when they're there. He was one of those guys, and he didn't even try. He was just there, and you're like, that's Lane Benoit.
And that's what was nice about Lane, because he wasn't cocky or anything like that. He always took time to talk to people. If they had a question, he'd answer it. If you just stood by and watched him, for instance, like at that Concord show last year, was a perfect example of him at his finest. Just talking to young kids, older people, just whatever was happening, he was right there, and he just wanted to be a part of it. And that's what's so sad when you lose somebody like that. That was just such an asset and such an inspiration to all the other hunters out there. It didn't matter who it was, that's the way he was.
Yeah.
And it's truly, truly, truly going to be missed by myself and, a lot of people that I know.
Very much so. John, what's your fondest memory of Lane? Like a moment you had with Lane?
Okay, I'm filming him up in Vermont, right? And he's using a muzzle-loading shotgun. So we're on these turkeys. And first of all, when Lane says we're going to take a hike, man, I want to tell you what, get ready to take a hike. I'm not lying. We drove his Jeep there, his old Jeep, up this mountain road off. I'm like, where the hell is it going? And we heard a bird gobble. And this bird, I'm not kidding you, had to been a mile away up on the top of this ridge. They go, let's go. We got to get up there. I'm like, all right. So I got a tripod, a camera, and all the gear and stuff, and we just start going. So we get up there, right, and we locate the bird. And we're looking like two dogs crapping roofing nails trying to find a place to sit down because he gobbled like 30 yards away. So we look at each other, our eyes got real big, and we just sit down. And right about 10 yards in front of us, there's like this mound. It's like where they maybe years ago where they logged or something, and it was just like this just big hump, right? So we start calling a little bit, and I'm filming, and this bird is getting so close that you just feel the gobbles, the spitting and the drumming. He was within less than 10 yards, and we never shot that bird. He would not stick his head up over it. He kept coming, and then he got to that point where that high point was, and he would not commit to come over that. And we sat there and sat there and sat there. That was pretty much one of the best times. And then when he did finally shoot his bird, he doesn't tell me that he's hard of hearing. I mean, when I say hard of hearing, you have to yell at him. So now you're turkey hunting, and you're trying to film a turkey hunt and be on the same page as the hunter when to shoot the bird. So I'm like, Lane, shoot. And now the bird's getting further to my right, and I'm having a hard time panning to the right. And finally, I pretty much yelled at him and then shot the bird. So it was pretty comical. But he goes, I couldn't hear you. I'm like, that would have been nice to know before all this happened. So those two memories right there were pretty much and then down here turkey hunting with me, of course, it was just awesome. We had just had such good times, just laughing all the time and just talking about the stuff we love to do.
Yep.
And I'm so glad I was able to share that time with him.
Well, spending some time with Lane myself, he seemed to have a lot of little mannerisms and idiosyncrasies. And he had a slew of sayings. Was there any saying that he would say more often than the next that you liked the most?
Geez, I can't. I know what you're talking about because he did them a lot when we were together, and he just make you laugh.
Yeah,
he always has something to say, and it was just absolutely hilarious. And I don't have one right off the top of my head,
Sure.
but I can remember him saying that. And the funny thing is it was really kind of weird. After he passed, I got the call that morning, and it was like all I heard all day long was him talking. I couldn't get it out of my head, just him talking about the stuff that we talked about, like he was still right there.
Yeah.
It was kind of weird, but that's what happened that whole day. That first day, it was like he was just right there. He's still okay.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can instantly go back to moments and hear him talking to you as though you're standing next to him when something like this happens. It's uncanny, and I can remember several of the words that Lane said to me the last time I was physically next to him at Paul's house over in Washington, just hanging out on the front porch, drinking a beer with him. The first thing he said to me, actually, when I got out of my truck, and granted, he's met me prior to this, but he hadn't seen me in a long time, and he hadn't hung out with me in a while, and he didn't really remember who I was, even though he knew of my work and the podcast and the Facebook page and all that stuff, and he wanted me to be a part of his North American Tracker team, which I emphatically said yes. He wanted to check me out a little bit, and when my Facebook profile picture is that of me with my Duck Dynasty beard, and I get out of my truck, and Lane looks at me, and I look at him, and I don't look anything like Lane now. I'm a clean-shaven guy. And he goes, "You don't look anything like your Facebook picture."
There you go. Exactly.
That was the first thing awesome. He said to me. He says, "Yeah, this is Duck Dynasty, man. Sorry."
And you'll never forget that.
Never, ever.
Yeah. And, I got another time was when he took me to his dad's house when I was up there, and I mean literally spent probably better part of at least a half a day, if not more, just with his dad in his house. He let me. Not that it was a big house. You just do whatever you want. Just go walk around, look at everything. And just some of the stories between Lane and his dad that day was just absolutely incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible. Just the stuff that we talked about and that his dad talked about and the stories. It was just amazing.
Yeah.
And his dad ended up giving me one of his books and like one of his commemorative coins. I don't know if you've ever seen one. Kind of a neat thing.
No,
but,
I don't think I
gave
have.
me that and a book and a couple other things. It was really, really neat. Really neat.
John, was there anything that you changed or added to your hunting skill set that you learned from Lane?
Yeah, I mean, as a deer hunter, he was a tracker. I never got into that because I never was brought up with that and never really learned how to do it. But as we're walking in the woods, turkey hunting, he was just showing me things and signing what to look for as far as, the buck track, the stride, how wide that track is, how that deer acted through this type of terrain. It had a lot to do with how big the deer was and what was on top of his head. I mean, just all kinds of neat stuff that he told me that, I kind of knew some of it, but a lot of it I did not know. And boy, I'll tell you what, it's a real eye-opening experience when somebody points some different things out to you that you've never seen before.
Right.
And all of us as hunters, 10 people can walk through the woods and 10 people see 10 different things. It's, it's not, everybody doesn't see the same.
Right. What would you say you're going to miss the most about Lane?
His laugh.
Yeah.
Just being around him. Yep. That was awesome.
Yep. Yeah, it's a sad day in the hunting community. It's I wish we were getting together on different circumstances. Tonight.
Exactly.
But,
yep.
Yeah, I've shed quite a few tears over this.
You and me both.
Yep.
It's hard to spend a lot of time with somebody that just had so much fun with. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah, we will forever miss Lane. He was a heck of a hunter and just a great guy. And I learned a lot from him. And I don't know. They've only made one of Lane Benoit.
Exactly. That mold was broke for sure. That he was one of a kind.
Yep.
So, and like I said, I'm just happy that I was able to spend time with him.
Me too. Dusty.
We had a blast.
Yeah, just you watch his videos and his, as he's in the woods and he's, spreading a tip that nobody else but Lane Benoit could spread because it was a factual tip, and that's what separated Lane Benoit from everybody else I've ever known is the fact that he was willing to lead you to the success of a harvest through his skills. He wasn't hiding anything. Is there something that you could tell us there that Lane taught you as far as the turkey hunt? We'll even go into the turkey hunting.
As far as the deer hunting part, what was neat was just when you were, like you said, the presence of him, when you were standing around and he was talking to a crowd of people, nobody else was talking. They were paying attention to what he had to say. And to me, just be, standing by watching that was kind of awesome to see because, a lot of people just think they know it all, to be honest with you. And obviously we don't. None of us do. But when he talked in the head of seminars, I mean, everything that was coming out of the man's mouth was real good information. And if you took it, you could put it to use and you could definitely make it work for sure.
That is so true. You sit there. If he started talking, everybody shut up in the circle and just listen. You did not want to miss a single comment at all.
No, that was kind of neat to see that. Not too many people that can get your attention like that.
Right. That's what separated Lane Benoit from everybody else. He was the man when it come to tracking. Absolutely.
It's just and I know you didn't spend a lot of time with him, but I know you heard some of the stories, and you're like, if this was any other person that you might not know, you'd be going, this guy's full of baloney. But it was fact. Every damn bit of it was fact.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
It was amazing. Awesome. It was definitely amazing. Awesome and amazing. The information, Jay and myself were very, very fortunate to have him as a guest on the show. And wow, I mean, that's something that we can listen to and go back to and really think that Lane Benoit was the very best at tracking. He not cocky, laid back.
No, that's what I liked about him. Not at all.
And he would help you.
Absolutely.
That was a unique thing. Had all that information and was 100% glad to help you.
Exactly. Yep. Did you ever get a chance to drive anywhere with him? On dirt roads or anywhere?
Not really, but other than just like walking around a dirt road.
No, I'm talking driving in a vehicle.
Well, yeah, I think I know what you're getting at.
I got to hear this.
This is kind of like you, Dusty. Like when we were driving through Ohio.
Now, I hadn't known him. I knew him, but I never been with him to drive around with him. So we're up in Vermont, and we're going to do some scouting for turkey. And he had that Jeep, and he starts going on these dirt roads, and I'm like, "Where's the freaking seatbelt?" I'm like, "We are gonna die."
Yep.
You a little nervous? I'm like, "Not really, but man, you're driving awful fast on these roads." He could have closed his eyes and drove these roads. I mean, he grew up there. He knew these roads like the back of his hand. But still, you as a passenger not being familiar with any of these dirt roads that got bankings that just go off into nowhere, and he's just hammering this thing. I'm like, oh crap! Yeah, so it was quite a bit of fun.
Yep.
I feel like Lane would be the guy that's always looking out in the distance and along the side of the road for that track and for something.
Yeah.
I'm the same way, and Jay can vouch for that. I'm all over. I'm driving, but yet I'm scanning.
And that's what separates the hunters and the people that are paying attention, because I'll have passengers in my vehicle, and I'm like, oh, there's a deer. And they're like, where? And it's just something that we pick out. We're always scanning. Always. It's something that we do.
Yeah,
amazing.
365 days a year, it does not matter. If you're in a vehicle and you can see, you're looking for critters. And that's a neat thing. It really
I'm sure Lane Benoit was just exactly like that.
And another thing he said to me, and I heard some of this before, and this makes perfect sense. And if you think about this, first of all, when you're scouting, I always have binoculars with me, no matter what. They're in my vehicle. It's a great scouting tool. And that's 365 days a year also. And then people look for a deer. You don't look for just a deer. You look for an ear, a tail whip, a leg. If you use those skills to look for deer in the woods, you are going to be way more successful than looking for a deer.
Right.
And that is a fact.
Amazing.
That is exactly right. And I was about to say that. It's like
You know, the people that they have a hard time seeing a deer, but I don't see the deer. I just saw a leg,
right,
or a tail whip, or an ear flick, or a part of an antler.
Right.
And all those things are important as a hunter.
It's the flick you see through the brush at 100
That's
yards.
correct.
You're like, that's a deer. Like, how do you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Trust me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
well, John, this has been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on the Big Buck Podcast and sharing your insights and knowledge and your friendship with about Lane Benoit, and how you knew him and over many, many years. And he'll be severely missed. But it's nice to hear that some of his friends tell some stories. So
he will never be forgotten, that's for sure.
Never forgotten. Never, ever forgotten.
And thank you, guys, so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 100 of the Big Buck Registry's Big Buck Deer Hunting Podcast, a tribute to Lane Benoit, Part 1. In tomorrow's episode, the tribute to Lane Benoit, Part 2, we have dinner at Paul's house. Paul Dupuis, Lane's last cameraman, and we feast on venison from Lane's last buck over wine at a country setting dinner table in central New Hampshire at Paul's cabin. Can't wait.